Hello everyone, in today's video we're gonna go over some basic stats which help you to identify weaker players, which in turn would help you to start making more money today. And to work with stats we use Statname.net. If you are unfamiliar, this is the biggest online poker player statistics database, both for no limit and PLO games. At the time of recording, it provides the biggest coverage for PokerStars, GG Poker, iPoker, 888, Chico and WPN. You can find the link in the description. Let's start with the interface and go over the tabs that we have here. First we have mining. Here you can buy hand histories for your stakes. It updates daily. Next we have some interesting articles. We have frequently asked questions. And finally my account where you can find and manage all of your subscriptions. Back to the homepage. Now we look on the left. Here at the top we can set the period of time, and I recommend to never go over 12 months. Then we can select between a main window and a window with a breakdown for different game types and stakes. Next we can check out top players on our stakes or our site. For example, let's go with GG Poker, no limit Hold'em, 510 stakes, 6 max games. And let's run the search and take a look. And you have all the info. Now let's get back to the main window and go over some stats in detail. This first unit at the top displays the main info. VPIP, PFR, 3-bet, win rate, number of hands, preferred stake, and total earnings. We can use this to determine the type of player, whether he's a regular, recreational player or a fish. Okay, here we have some detailed stats. We can choose between heads-up games, short-handed full-ring games, or short-handed and full-ring combined. And we can switch between PLO and no limit. And we have some tabs on the left. Base, PFR, cold call, 3-bet, C-bet versus C-bet. And finally down here we have a little summary and results by month. Let's use Invoker as an example to see what stats Statname provides and how can we use it at the tables. Okay, first we have number of hands to see how relevant this data is. We have total earnings and we have BB per 100 win rate to see if the regular is good or not. Or we can use it as a main stat for table selection if we have more than 3000 hands. We want guys that lose 75 BBs per 100 and more. Next we have preflop stats, VPIP, voluntary put money in pot, meaning that the guy had an option to fold his hand, but he decided to put money in pot instead. For regulars, this stat is usually between 16 and 32% for fooling tables. And when we're looking for target players, we want this stat to be 50% and more. Over less than 3k hands. If we have more than 3k hands, we want to check their win rate instead. PFR, preflop raise, how often he enters the pot aggressively preflop. Regulars usually have a difference between VPIP and PFR of around 4 to 10%. If we see a player with a difference of more than 10%, it is highly probable that this is a recreational player. Next we have 3-bet total, how often this player 3-bets preflop. Values from 7 to 12% are considered acceptable. And usually this one used as a dynamic stat like small blind versus button 3-bet. Next, fold versus 3-bet, how often he folds to 3-bet after open raising. And anything from 55% and more is exploitable under some conditions. 4-bet range, 4.2% for Invoker, basically average for his stakes. And everything higher to bluff heavy, everything lower to value heavy basically. And finally we get to showdown block. First stat when to showdown indicates how often this player actually gets to the showdown after seeing the flop. So basically this stat tells us how stationary this player is. And usually it is used in combination with won money at showdown or won when saw flop. But we get to those later. Acceptable when to showdown is 25 to 32. And if you have lower than that, then you fold too much post-flop. If you have higher than that, then you are a bit stationary. And for this stat to converge, we need at least 3k hands. Next, won money at showdown. This stat basically shows us how often this player wins at showdown. Well, this stat on its own is completely useless. We only use it in combination with won when soft flop and when to showdown. Well, it is considered that values from 48 to 55% are good, but it's hard to determine because this one really depends on when to showdown and won when soft flop. For example, guy with the lower when to showdown usually wins more and vice versa. And we need 5k hands for this stat to converge. And finally, one of the most important stats, won when soft flop. This one shows how often guy wins after seeing the flop. Acceptable values from 45 to 52, normal values from 48 to 50. If it's too low, we don't bluff enough and we give up too much. If it's too high, we bluff too much. And it works really well in combination with when to showdown and aggression by street. And this one converges from 3k hands. Now let's move to the post-flop stats. First we have c-bet. Don't even mind this stat. This one is completely useless, so we just ignore it. We only check out c-bet in position and c-bet out of position. And the most profitable action you can actually make in poker is c-betting in position. This action is really the most profitable in all the poker. Well, basically c-bet is a continuation bet, meaning the bet you make after raising pre-flop. And this is one of the basic moves in poker, which allows you to either put pressure on your opponent and use it as a bluff, or to increase the size of the pot with a value hand and get more value. And the frequency of a c-bet basically shows us the strengths of this move. Fold to c-bet total we also ignore. We only check fold to c-bet in position and fold to c-bet out of position. As you can see, the difference is significant, especially before the river. So what is it, fold to c-bet? Basically, this is how often a player folds against a c-bet. We use it to determine what type of player we're facing and to find leaks as well. This bet stat shows how often the very first action of a player is an aggressive one. So it doesn't matter if it's a 3-bet pot, limped pot, 4-bet pot, 5-bet pot, if he's a pre-flop caller or pre-flop aggressor, this one shows how often the very first action of his is aggressive. Check raises and raises are often used to take away initiative and to increase pot against aggressive players. Default numbers are 10 to 15% on different streets, but it really depends on the structure of the board. On some boards we don't want to raise at all, on some boards we want to raise 20-25% exploitatively. And finally the yummy part, aggression frequency, which is basically a ratio of aggressive moves to passive moves. Aggressive moves are bet and raise, passive check and call. This is a key stat to determine the psychotype of our opponent, whether he's aggressive or passive or a maniac. And as you can tell, pretty much all the top players, all the very successful players are very aggressive, with a clear tendency to being stationary as well. So yeah, basically this stat determines our strategy and our range construction on every street against a player. And now let's take a look how it actually works in real life. Okay, first player V17 OK, 24-21. 7 BBs per 100, aggression closer to maniac. 1 when soft flop 49 good, and his biggest problem is his fold against a 3-bet 60%. Next we have Niceman 29-20. This one is actually closer to a calling station. His folds to c-bet are around 40%, so yeah, he doesn't like to fold. Art Can Fly 24-20, 380,000 hands on NL20, wow. Aggression closer to maniac and same problem against 3-bets. Okay, a lot of numbers. This guy is a recreational player. He plays a lot of hands, went to showdown 32, and he actually has some maniac tendencies as well. And the last one, Vin Diesel 32. Well, standard break-even regular with some aggressive tendencies.